This week in IT. Could your boss soon track your every move? Microsoft is quietly rolling out a new feature in Teams which uses Wi-Fi to establish your office whereabouts. At the same time, Microsoft is quietly switching up the security dial in Microsoft 365 with a new security baseline option that restricts risky file types and legacy protocols. And Windows Autopatch is getting a new CVE dashboard which shows every vulnerability and which devices are still exposed. So stay tuned for all of the latest IT news. Welcome to This Week in IT, the show where I talk about everything connected to Windows, Microsoft 365 and Azure. Today's episode is sponsored by our friends at Chaosoft. This is an interesting one that's been reported in the press over the last couple of weeks. Microsoft is gradually rolling out a new feature for organizations to turn on in Teams that would allow them to track quite precisely their location in the office, even down to the floor and department that they're currently located. Now, this uses Wi-Fi and the peripherals that the user is connected to establish their location. And Microsoft is saying that this should help to enable remote and hybrid working situations and be useful in an emergency. Now, this feature is going to be turned off by default, but of course there are some security and privacy worries over this new feature. Now, what I think about this is I'm not really sure that Microsoft's claims about helping hybrid work situations and potentially safety in an emergency, I can kind of see that might be useful. But if you turn this on, then I think the users should be given some control over whether they allow their information to be broadcast. Now, that doesn't help in an emergency, but let's say you have some kind of hybrid work situation where a colleague needs to know where you're located. You could maybe then opt to broadcast your information, your location, to your colleague. Now, as I understand, that's not how this works. It essentially gets turned on by the organization, and only during office hours, it will be able to essentially broadcast your location, I guess, to every other Teams user who might want to know it. Now, there's some research that suggests that we don't like being monitored, and it kind of erodes trust between the employee and the employer. So I'd be very careful about switching this on. If you do switch it on, then I think you have to have some very solid reasons and use case scenarios as to why you're doing this, because some people are going to be afraid this will be used to enforce return to office mandates, that kind of thing, and just a general breach of privacy and trust. Apparently there is an icon that will be displayed to show when this feature is active, so users will be aware that their location is being monitored and tracked. So at least that's something, but it still leaves me a little bit uneasy, and I think turning this on might not be the best idea. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this. Are you planning to enable it for your organization, and how do you think users are going to react? Before I go into the next story, I've got a quick favour to ask you. About 44% of the people who watched last week's video weren't subscribed to the channel. As we go live today, we're on about 13,840 subscribers. I'd love it if we could push that up to 13,900 this week. So if you'd like to see these weekly news updates from Petri.com, please subscribe to the channel and don't forget to hit the bell notification to make sure that you don't miss out on the latest uploads. Microsoft announced this week that the baseline security mode for Microsoft 365 is now generally available, and this applies settings across Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, Teams, and Entra to provide a more secure security baseline for your organization, doing things like limiting access to risky file types, disabling legacy protocols that are no longer considered secure like POP3 and SMTP, that kind of thing. And I think there are about 17 or 18 settings that it applies if you decide to enable it. Now, this is something that you have to opt into. It's not it's not enabled by default if you've already established your Microsoft 365 tenant at least. And I think this is probably a good idea, but Microsoft is saying that you really, of course, need to test this. So you can test what they're calling BSM, so baseline security mode, in simulation mode, which allows you to see the potential impact of what happens when you enable this. Because of course, if you start disabling access to particular file types or to certain protocols, this really has the potential to break your users' workflows. BSM also enforces phishing-resistant multi-factor authentication, so your users will be more secure from that point of view. In other words, you have to have something extra that's more than just your password in order to log in. In terms of risky file types, it blocks legacy Office documents and macros. So obviously, if you're still relying on those things, you really need to check that out in simulation mode first. And it disables access to unsigned content and untrusted files to help limit the exposure devices have to malware and ransomware. If you're using Teams rooms, then it's worth mentioning that you must be using modern authentication. So if you enable BSM, then unmanaged devices may no longer be able to join meetings, and participants may be blocked from rejoining a meeting after they've been removed. Now, BSM isn't going to cost you anything. You can enable this for free. It has comprehensive reporting, and Microsoft is saying that it works with third-party security tools as well. Windows Autopatch is getting a new CVE dashboard, and this is going to list all CVE vulnerabilities from the last 90 days, and it will let you see which devices are still exposed to those vulnerabilities, hopefully enabling you to get them patched in a timely manner. Microsoft says the dashboard gets complete CVE IDs, descriptions, severity scores, and the exploitation status, so are they actively being exploited out in the real world right now, and that the report refreshes every few days and includes links to Microsoft advisories so admins can quickly understand what the issue actually is. You're going to get device-specific details so you can see which devices are still vulnerable to a particular CVE, and if there's no patch available, then what the potential workarounds to protect the device might be. Admins will be able to filter the view in this dashboard so that they can narrow down the results by product family, OS edition, severity, or even exploitation status. Of course, that will be very useful, or even by deployment ring. And you'll be able to export the results if you want to analyze that data somewhere else. This new dashboard, it's in preview at the moment, but you can access it under the report section, then Windows Autopatch in Intune. So do go and take a look at that. I think it's going to be quite useful. If you found this video useful, I'd really appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up, because it helps to get it seen by more people on YouTube. I'm going to leave you with another video on the screen about a fix that Microsoft pushed out last month to patch a long-standing security vulnerability with Windows shortcut links. I'd like to thank again our sponsors of today's episode, Chaosoft, but that's it from me for this week, and I'll see you next time.